I believe that learning the geography of Israel will help us better understand some of the things that we read in the Bible. We're going to take a look at three things. One, who and or what borders the land of Israel. Two, the four sections that make up Israel. And three, some of the cities that are mentioned in the Bible in this brief study. In part one, we're going to look at what borders the land of Israel and the four sections that make up Israel. To the west, we see the Mediterranean Sea. It's also referred to as the Great Sea in many passages in the Old Testament. During the time of Jesus, the Roman Empire ruled the world, and they confidently called the Mediterranean Sea our sea. To the southwest, we see Egypt. Egypt has one of the longest records of history of any country. Experts have suggested the country goes back as far as 4000 to 6000 BC. And the book of Exodus, chapter 12, verse 40, says that the Hebrew people were held as slaves in Egypt for 430 years. To the east, we see Jordan. In biblical times, the country that is known as Jordan contained the lands of Edom, Moab, Ammon, and Bashan. The Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Persians controlled this area known as Jordan for centuries, so Israel never really had a conflict per se directly with Jordan, even though they did have conflicts with the people who lived in Edom, Moab, Ammon, and Bashan. To the northeast, we see Syria. Israel and Syria have fought from the beginning of when they were first established. Damascus, the capital of Syria, is the oldest occupied city that still exists. In the book of 2 Kings, chapter 5, verses 1 through 27, we read about how Naaman, a Syrian general, came to Elisha to be cleansed of leprosy. To the north, we see Lebanon, which was known as Phoenicia back during biblical times. The land of Phoenicia was and is known for its great cypress and cedar trees. We see in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 9, verses 10 through 14, where Hiram, king of Tyre, supplied King Solomon with all the cypress and cedar trees, as well as gold that he needed to build the temple and his own house. We see where the Jordan River serves as a natural border on the east side of Israel. It's only about 65 miles from the Sea of Galilee to the Dead Sea, but because of its twisting contour, it covers about 135 miles. It declines at a rate of 25 feet per mile along its twisting 135-mile journey. Its descent rate is about 1,200 feet above sea level to about 1,286 feet below sea level. The place where it enters the Dead Sea is the lowest point on earth. Now let's look at the four major sections of the land of Israel. The first one is Galilee. Galilee is the northern part of the land of Israel. It's divided into two sections, Upper Galilee, which is mostly mountains and rugged land, and Lower Galilee. Lower Galilee is a fertile land. A majority of the produce that Israel uses comes from Lower Galilee. Galilee is where Jesus spent most of his time preaching and teaching. Next is Samaria. Samaria is the area where the Samaritans lived. The Samaritans, for the most part, came about when the people of Israel were carried off to Assyria captivity. The Syrians left the old and weak people behind there in Israel, and they eventually intermarried with the pagan people who lived there. This is one of the things that God forbid them to do when he gave the Hebrew people this land. The Jews hated them for this and considered them not only half-breeds, but also as unholy. A majority of the Jews hated them so much that when they traveled from Judea to Galilee, they would cross over the Jordan River and go the long route to keep from having to go through Samaria. Next is Judea. Judea is where Jerusalem is located, and Jerusalem is the place that the Jews felt was holy and where they should worship God. The Samaritan woman at the well understood how the Jews felt about Samaritans. This is what she told Jesus in the book of John, chapter 4, verses 7 through 9. A woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Then she told Jesus this in the book of John, chapter 4, verse 20. "Our fathers worshiped on this mountain, and you Jews say that Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. This is part of Jesus' reply in the book of John, chapter 4, verse 22. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. And next is Idumea, which is also known as Edom, which is in the southern part of Israel and also crossed over the boundary line to Jordan. It was made up of the descendants of Esau, the twin brother of Jacob. Just click on the video that says A Brief Study of the Geography of Israel, Part 2 to continue.